Welcome to the J.D. Levy and Associates Calibration Point podcast. Our podcasts are designed to bring a conversational exploration of key topics that we believe will provide value and insight to those serving in the nonprofit sector. We will highlight new developments in the field, latest research, and things we're learning from our own clients that we can share. If there are topics that you would like to see explored, please send them to us through our website at jdlevyassociates.com.
I want to welcome everybody to today's episode of our Calibration Point podcast, and I'm excited to have Paul Linge with me. He is a longtime friend, professional associate, and he is the counseling pastor and director of the Crossroads Counseling Center. And we are going to discuss today unlocking forgiveness and what that means to being a key to a healthy workplace. And just to jump right in, Paul, one, thank you for coming on. And two, what does that mean? And let's just unpack what unlocking forgiveness looks like or the implications that has into building a healthy team and healthy workplace.
Yeah. Hey, Jamie, great to be with you today. Yes, the whole premise of discussing this topic of forgiveness kind of points to the fact that it's not something natural, right? We're not doing a topic on, how to have more bitterness in the workplace or how to 7 ways to hold a better grudge against your coworker, because we're very natural at that stuff. But forgiveness takes some deliberate effort. And I wanted to talk a little bit about forgiveness. Because number one, it's good for the soul, and any of us that have kids, we teach our children to forgive, to apologize, because it's good for us. But also, it's good for operational efficiency. I believe that one of the biggest barriers to operational efficiency in organizations, for-profits or nonprofits, is unforgiveness. And if we just stop and even think about that, it costs organizations a lot, because people are going around people that they have grudges against. Sometimes they might even deliberately sabotage someone or not point out a mistake ahead of time because of a break in relational equity. So I think for leaders, it's good to embrace this idea of forgiveness, whether that's on the board level or at any level in an organization, because it unlocks health and operational efficiency as well. And so I think kind of a good framework, as you mentioned in the introduction, I serve as the counseling pastor. And so, a lot of my reference, comes from, biblical sources. And I think a great framework for kind of understanding forgiveness, because I think a lot of people are subject matter familiar with forgiveness, but like, what does it look like in a practical sense? And there's a verse from the Old Testament. It's Isaiah 61:1. It's actually a prophetic verse about Jesus. And it says, "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted." And then it mentions 2 more groups of people. It says to proclaim liberty for the captives and freedom for the prisoners. I think that provides a great framework as we think about forgiveness, these 2 groups, captives and prisoners. Fundamentally, captives are victims. Something happened to them. They got captured. They got carried away. Prisoners are offenders. So, they've done something that has caused them to be locked up, to be incarcerated. And so when we think about the ultimate goal, which I think is in a relationship, is reconciliation, those are really the 2 ingredients. That's kind of the mathematical formula, if you will, is forgiveness plus, repentance or apology. Forgiveness on the part of the victim plus apology on the part of the offender is what leads to reconciliation. So we can't always control if the offender apologizes. And we'll talk a little bit about apology. But what we can control is if we continue to hold that person in contempt, or if we will continue to hold a grudge or give into bitterness, or if we will forgive them. And so that's kind of, I think, just a helpful framework, because, and really the truth of the matter is, I think residing in each one of us is both a captive and a prisoner, both a victim. I know that I've hurt people, but I've also been hurt by people.
Right.
And so I think just having that as a kind of a baseline helps kind of set the stage for even understanding forgiveness. So I think one of the best scripture passages that talks about forgiveness is where Jesus it's in Matthew 18. One of his disciples, Peter, comes to him and he says, "How many times am I supposed to forgive my brother? Like 7 times?" And Jesus responds, "No, actually 70 times 7. In other words, don't put a limit on the number of times that you forgive, because God hasn't put a limit on you." And then he tells this fascinating story. He says there was a king who had a servant. The servant took out a loan from the king, a large sum of money. The day came to repay the loan. The servant says, "I don't have it. I can't pay it. Please have mercy on me." The king says, "You know what? I'm going to write it off. You don't have to pay me back. I forgive this debt." That servant had a coworker who owed him a small amount of money, like $25. And he said, "You got to pay it. You have to pay it today." Well, the rumor gets back around to the king. They say, "You know that guy you just forgave this huge debt for?" Said he wouldn't even go and forgive his coworker this small amount. And the king says, "Go find that that first servant, lock him up, put him in prison, and don't let him out until he's paid the last penny." And then Jesus says, "This is how your heavenly Father will treat you unless you forgive your brother or sister from the heart." Most of us, though, have not been taught, how do you do that? How do you forgive somebody from the heart so that that offense, that pain doesn't replay on a loop tape over and over and kind of torment us over the years? And I think the key is actually found in that parable, because Jesus uses the language of financial transaction to describe our relational dynamics. And we do this unconsciously in English. We use the language of, will you owe him respect, or she's going to pay her back, oh, pay. We do this not even thinking about it. And what Jesus, I think, is saying is that the intangibles of our life are like those financial transactions. And so forgiveness, fundamentally, it's not pretending like something bad didn't happen or that there wasn't a wrong. It's actually naming it and saying, nonetheless, I cancel this debt that this person owed me. This person owed me honesty, but they didn't deliver it. I'm going to cancel that debt. This person owed me care, but they didn't deliver. I'm going to cancel that debt. And it's so freeing, as people experience this, because if we don't do it, we live our lives as kind of long-term debt collectors, right? Which nobody likes a debt collector. It's just a hassle. But when we forgive the debt that somebody owed us, it's truly freeing, and I think unlocks health and efficiency in relationships and in an organization.
Kind of jumping on to what you've shared there, it also then seems that for forgiveness in the workplace or in relationships, in order for me to release that, there also then has to probably be a deeper release of my pride.
Yes, I think so. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think fundamentally forgiveness is 2 things. It's canceling the debt that the person owed you. And then the second thing is it's releasing them from our judgment and saying, and I think this is what feels risky for people when they forgive. It's like, well, gosh, if I forgive this person, then it's just like I'm letting them off the hook. It's like they're getting off scot-free. And it's like, no, actually, we're just shifting courtrooms. We're moving them from the courtroom where you have set yourself up as judge and jury to the courtroom of letting God be their judge, because he's a lot better at judging than we are. And so I think that's helpful, just going, okay, it's not up to me to exact justice on this person who has hurt me. But it is my job, my responsibility to forgive them and to cancel the debts that they owed me.
To your point, that applies no matter what my worldview is, whether it's faith-centered or not. do I believe that I should be the one who's exacting justice for wrongs? And kind of to your description, if instead we're willing to ask the question of where's my pride, and instead of then exacting justice on them, forgive them. I mean, that should happen ideally, no matter what my worldview is, right?
Yes, I believe it is. And I think it makes just for a healthier, more civil society too.
Right.
One of the things that we're seeing in culture today is just a very, very strong, unforgiving spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereby we are canceling people, we are shutting them down because of something that happened maybe 2 decades ago when they were a teenager. And we want to hold people to personal responsibility, but I'm hoping that we can cultivate both in workplaces and as a culture just a more forgiving dynamic, whereby we can learn, we can grow, we can adjust. So I think regardless of what a person's faith worldview is, I think we could all agree that forgiveness is good for us as a culture.
And to your point, there's a lot of unforgiveness, and then coupled with that, I guess is probably why, or part of it, there's a lot of a failure to look at ourselves. And so we just exact justice on others without really executing forgiveness, or even turning that statement to ourselves and asking, are there things that I've done that I should be seeking forgiveness for? And that matters before I try to exact justice on someone else.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's a great book. A lot of people are familiar with the 5 love languages that Gary Chapman wrote. He also wrote a follow-up book called The 5 Languages of Apology. And it really is, it might even be better phrased as the 5 parts of a good apology. And it includes things like expressing regret, which is I am sorry, accepting responsibility, I was wrong. The 3rd part is making restitution. What can I do to make it right? Number 4 is genuinely repenting. I will try not to do it again. And number 5, requesting forgiveness. Will you please forgive me? And so part of this, to your point, Jamie, of kind of recognizing our own pride is not just who do I need to forgive, but where do I need to apologize? Where do I need to make things right with someone that I've wronged? And that's true whether that's in a marriage relationship or in a work relationship. And because the initiation of an apology on the part of the offender is a powerful thing that can fix a whole lot really quickly. And I think one of the reasons people are a little bit reticent to forgive is because it feels risky. It feels like, and I've had people say, well, I can forgive what has happened, but this stuff is still ongoing. This pattern of behavior that this person is doing to me is still ongoing, which is where I always make the distinction between forgiveness and trust. Forgiveness is about the past, about things that have already happened. We don't forgive things that are going to happen next week. We forgive what's already happened. But trust is about the future. And I think we have to work on these as 2 different constructs. Forgiveness is, I think we can do that in a thorough way, in a life-giving way. But trust really is about the future. And so I think people sometimes are reticent to forgive because they think, well, that means I have to trust the person again. And I say, no, you don't have to trust them again. If they haven't demonstrated trustworthy behavior, you shouldn't trust them. But you can still forgive them so that what they did to you isn't played on a loop tape like Groundhog Day over and over in your mind every time you think about them. So,
that's really powerful.
Yeah,
it seems that in a team environment, that would just be really critical because, to your right, we love your analogy of prisoners and captives. And we've both been, you and I have been on both sides of those just from life experience. And boy, if we can recognize that and then add in what you're saying, that forgiveness isn't predicative of future behavior, but trust is what we focus on for future behavior. But forgiveness is being able to say, I can renew myself to this point. I mean, that's really powerful. And at least in the work we do, there, as you well know, probably far better than I do, just the intensity of the burnout and the great exodus, now that they're calling it, of leaders from the nonprofit sector. And one of the things that we hear so often is that they're just in despair about this, as you term it, spirit of unforgiveness. And it creates havoc in their teams and their organizations and with their relationships. And it seems that this understanding that you've identified, and I love it, separating out trust and forgiveness, can go a long way towards even just setting what are realistic expectations in those relationships. Because at least in the work I do, I see a lot of leaders that are projecting trust into forgiveness. And I think they're getting stuck because they can't find that place where it's making them whole again. And to what you're saying, it's never going to make them feel whole about that issue because they're two separate things.
Right. Yeah. And, I think anybody that's led anything longer than about 5 minutes has been hurt, right? Has been a target, has had a bullseye on their back in some way. And so, and this may even be, a conversation for another podcast, but just talking about leadership pain and pain that leaders have been through, some of the cumulative wounds that leaders collect as they are in their roles, that are just kind of the natural part of being either an executive director or in some sort of leadership role. And I think with that, I think part of the burnout is from that cumulative leadership pain, but often it's not about technical stuff, as you well know, Jamie. It's often about the relational things,
right?
The misunderstandings, the mischaracterizations. And that's where I, feel so strongly that forgiveness is such a powerful tool for personal freedom, to not be owned by those pain points of the past, but to really release them, to cancel those debts, and to move forward in a healthy way.
I think we'll pause here because I do think you've just identified a really good segment to this topic, and that is leadership pain. And one of the things that we hear a lot, and I have my whole career, I would say it's intensifying, are executive directors who, especially in the nonprofit world, who talk about how lonely their position is. And it seems that there's maybe something we need to unpack around that sense of loneliness. And what you're beginning to kind of open the door on is this understanding of cumulative leadership pain. And I'm going to guess the connection between those two. Would that be accurate?
Yes, I really think it is. And I think, often leaders are probably not even cognizant of it. I kind of use the analogy, my wife and I have done, a variety of distance events, whether that was triathlon or half marathon. And a day would come when you're training that you're just tired, and you didn't train that hard that day necessarily, but it wasn't about that day. It was about the 3 months of training before that, which we call cumulative fatigue. And in the same way that the body can become physically cumulatively fatigued, I believe that the soul, kind of our emotions, our mental health can experience cumulative fatigue. And especially in an environment like a pandemic with a lot of unknowns, an environment where there's, for whatever reason, high criticism of leaders. And so, I think that would be a great topic to unpack more. And as you said too, loneliness, I think, is a key figure as well.
Well, everybody, we're going to have Paul back on and unpack this. We're just going to call it chapter 2 because it is something we see a lot, and I've not really had the framework to better unpack and translate what I'm seeing. And when you combine things we talked about today, I like your analogy of the captive and the prisoner, and the idea of, which I think is just really critical, separating out forgiveness and trust, and how that can lead us into better understanding a healthy workplace. I think just personal health, to your point, and that increases operational efficiency and effectiveness as well. So Paul, I definitely want to continue this, and let's plan on that. We'll have this kind of we'll set up a segment 2, chapter 2, and let's dig into leadership pain and how that relates to some of the symptoms we see in working with leaders, and have you shed some light on how we better navigate that. So Paul, I'm just really thankful for you sharing with us today. This has been really insightful for me. Again, just, really being able to understand and think separately about just our sense of forgiveness and trust. I know even just in meetings that I have the rest of the day, I think that's going to carry in pretty strongly into some of my work, just not only just for the rest of my life, but for today, and some things I need to talk to some clients about. So I really appreciate your being on. Paul, we'll get this next chapter 2 going. And so thank you for your time and your gifts.
Sounds great, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the J.D. Levy & Associates Calibration Point podcast. If you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please reach out using the contact page on our website, jdlevyassociates.com.